This video is concerned with process design. Now, when we think of an organization, we think of its corporate strategy, and from the corporate strategy we get the operations strategy. And the operations strategy is how the company is going to make products, how it's going to organize its production facility, and how it's going to carry on business in a routine sense day to day. It's the operations end of the business. This is the practical doing part of the business. Part of the operations strategy is design. It's essential that design cuts across nearly all parts of the business. Clearly the product must be designed, and clearly the design must be in keeping with the customer requirements. But there are other parts to the design as well. It could be that the whole business needs design. It needs to be laid out and planned. But generally we consider that as a part of the operation strategy, how the plant is designed, where the machinery go, where the offices are located, and what equipment they need, and so on. So generally speaking, when we think of design, we think of the product. But there are other dimensions, and I think we need to be clear about precisely what we mean by design and what we're talking about. Are we talking about the final product which meets customer requirements, or are we talking about some aspect of design related to the production process? But out of the design, let's say we're talking about the product for a moment. Out of the design of the product will determine the types of processes that have to be undertaken. Clearly, the more complex the design, the more complex the production. Perhaps the more components or the more work must be done on the final product. So there's an element then of planning and control which must be undertaken. It's important that the design generates mechanisms for planning and control. It may be regular monitoring, or it may be the design of the machinery and the layout of the machinery, the layout of the stores, and how is it all controlled as well. It's not just the planning in terms of the design, but what would be required in terms of control to ensure that the designs are implemented according to their specific requirements, the requirements on the drawings, for example. So design, the process of design, needs planning and control, and if it's going to be implemented in production, it must be thought about in terms of the actual operational layout of the business. So let's just recap on where we've got to on this one. We've got the operation strategy, which indicates how production takes place within the business and how production should be organized. We have the design of the product, and the design of the product will be subject to change depending on customer requirements and will be updated over a period of time in line with competitors' products and with trends and fashions and changes in the market. And these must be planned. The changes and the designs must be planned. There must be scope within the business to enable planning and design to take place. And once a new design has been developed, it must be controlled. It must be controlled in the sense that it must be monitored and it must be enabled. It must happen. There's no point in designing something that doesn't work or is not going to be implemented. And out of this planning and control, we get improvements. We get improvements in the operations strategy. We get new designs for the production layout. We get new designs for the product. We get a wholly emerging and innovative business. It's a totally turning over business. It's a business which is emerging all the time, and it's emerging because of the new designs for the products, and coupled with that the designs that are necessary the design changes, I should say, that are necessary within the production facility to enable the product changes. So we have this cycle, and this cycle really is a very innovative cycle. It's a cycle of change, constantly working towards changing the operation strategy. The operation strategy feeding to design, which will start to change over time. It will change in lines with products and so on. Planning, control, make sure it can happen, feeding back to improvements in the system, and so on. So what we've got is this circularity in terms of, it's almost innovation. Well, it is innovation. And operations management looks after this. This is the province of operations management. This is what operations management does. So let's talk about the design for a moment. We can see design in various ways. We can break up the whole design process into many parts. We have supply network designs, layout and flow designs, process technology, job design, product and service design. And that's what I was saying earlier, that when we think of design, we think of the product design, but we could also think about the production design, how the machines, how the functionality of the business is organized. That's a part of the design of the business, the design which enables the product to be produced. So we have these various complexities that we've got in this large yellow diagram, this circular type Venn diagram almost, this circle. So what we've got here is some of the complexities. Clearly in real organizations we may have a lot more complexity than we've got here. But that's the starting point for our discussion of design and the nature of design. Now let's start by talking about the nature and purpose of the design activity. Products and services and the processes which produce them have to be designed. It may seem like an obvious thing to say, but they don't just happen. The products must be designed, and they must be designed with customer requirements in mind. As should also be the case with services. Services are supplied to fulfill a need that the customers have, to address some requirement that the customers have. Decisions taken during the design stage of a product or service will have an impact on the decisions taken during the design of the process which produces those products and services, and vice versa. Now, that also is a very straightforward thing to say. Products determine the processes, and the design of the product will determine the design of the process. There's a strong correlation, if you like, a strong linkage between the two. If the product is made from metal, it'll have certain machinery. If it's made from wood, it'll have different machinery. Clearly, the processes are being determined by the product. The design of the product will determine the types of machinery and the types of processes. So clearly there's a linkage between the product, the design of the product, and the design of the processes. So we have a correspondence. Now, the design of products and services and the design of processes are interrelated and should be treated together. Designing the product or service, well, products and services should be designed in such a way that they can be created effectively. So products and services should be designed so that they can be created effectively. That's part of the designing process for production. It's important that the designs can be produced. It's important that they can be produced effectively. If the designs are too complex, they may be beyond the scope of the company. so they can't be produced, or they can't be produced effectively. So it's important that the products are designed knowing the capability of the business. Designing the process, well, product service design has an impact on the process design and vice versa. So again, it's almost reiterating the point, but the product and service design determines the processes. So the design of the product should suit the technology and capability and core skills of the organization. The design should address those, should take those into account. And there should be overall recognition that the design of the product determines the design of the processes. Processes should be designed so that they can create products and services which the operation is likely to produce. So the processes should be feasible within the organization. They should be doable. They should be capable of being done. So the tasks are not beyond the organization. The tasks are within the organization's capability, and that's important. So there is a very strong linkage between product design and process design. Now, the design of the product and the design of processes. Well, in manufacturing operations, overlapping activities of product and process design is beneficial. When designing the product, then the company may want to, at the same time, to design the process. So the two have to go hand in hand. There is recognition, or there should be recognition, that the product design determines the product process. And obviously the process will make the product. So clearly, in designing the product, there must be recognition, explicit recognition of the design process and of the processes that will be undertaken also within the business to produce the product. So, if we can imagine a company about to make a product or thinking of making a product, it must design the product. And during the process of designing the product, it must look at the design of the processes, perhaps the engineering processes that's going to be conducted to make the product. And it's important that the company keeps that in mind, keeps its finger on the pulse. It must realize the obligations that the business has towards existing products and existing customers. Designing a new product may need some restructuring of the business, may mean some disruption, which should be kept to a minimum. But in designing the product, it may require new capital equipment, it may require new skills. There are many aspects to it, and that these must be recognized during the design process. In terms of services, the overlap between services and process design is almost implicit in the nature of the service. So if a restaurant is supplying food, if that is the product the restaurant is supplying, which is more than likely the case, then the service and the product are very much linked together. They are almost indistinguishable. When we think of going to the restaurant for food, we're going for the service. We're going for the food and the service, and in a sense the product is a joint product. It is the two parts. So in designing the service, they are automatically almost designing the process. Now, designing processes, well, there are different process types that we need to consider. Process types are defined by the volume and variety of items they process. So process types really are categorized by the volume and the variety of the items. And we'll go through a list of these in a moment, but the distinguishing feature really is the volume of the output and the variety of the types. Process types go by different names depending on whether they are produce, products, or services. So really the process types, the names, are partially distinguished by whether the products are products, they produce products, or are they producing services. Now, project processes, first of all, one-off, complex, large-scale products with high work content. Now that could be making an aeroplane. It's a large-scale, complex product, and there's a lot of people involved in it. Sometimes they're made specially for customers. They could be changed around according to the requirements of the customers. So they're specially made. Everyone is customized. Everyone might be different depending on the customer's requirements. There is a defined start and finish time, quality and cost of objectives. So it almost goes without saying there will be a start and finish time. If there are no start and finish times, then the project is really out of control. So to have control over the project, there must be a start and finish time. And also the quality must be checked, and must be checked against the benchmarks. And the benchmarks will be those set out in the design specifications. And of course, there are cost objectives. It must be produced within a certain budget. Many different skills may have to be coordinated. For example, back to the airplane example, there may be electricians and carpenters and fabricators and designers. There may be scientists of all types looking at different processes involved in what happens, and engineers looking at the engines, and all sorts of people involved in the building of an aircraft. So many different skills have to be combined together. A project process describes the whole process. So when we talk about a project process, we're talking about everything. Now obviously that would be a very complex set of documentation in the case of an aircraft. But it will still have to be done. Every nut and bolt will have to be accounted for. Every one of them will have a job to do and will have a place in the overall design specification. So the process describes the whole process. The project process describes the whole process. And it could be, it's a one-off, like we've just described here, which is a project process. That's the first type of process we can imagine. A project which is a one-off. It's a big one-off job. Building a space shuttle or a space rocket. It's a one-off. But it could also be building a road. It's a one-off. Now, jobbing processes. These are very small quantities that are required by customers. One-offs, sometimes they're referred to as. Only a few that are required. Normally, very valued customers can get this done. Customers with a good reputation in the business. And the customers may require very few of these items, but they need to be modified in some way. They need to be processed in a slightly different way to meet their particular requirements. And these are the one-offs. There's very low repetition, and they're sometimes referred to as strangers. They're strangers because it's not what the company normally does. What the company normally does is the routine jobs that it makes. These ones are special requirements, so they're sometimes referred to as strangers in the language of the shop floor. they're customized to the requirements of the customer. So they're customized in particular ways. They'll have perhaps different functionality or a slightly different design. They're modified in line with the requirements of the customers. The skill requirement to make them is very broad. Sometimes the skill requirements may be very little because only small modifications are required. Sometimes quite major modifications are required and a lot of skills will be needed. Skilled jobber or teams complete the whole product. Usually when these jobs arrive in the company, they're given to someone to manage through, to see that the job is done, and they will manage it through the various processes. They try to do so with minimal disruption to the main line of work for the business. So they'll try to make sure that these specials, these one-offs, are completed, and they're completed with minimal disruption. Batch processes. Well, high volumes and low variety than for jobbing. So the batch have got higher volumes and lower variety. They're produced in batches. All the products look the same. They've all got the same technical requirements, the same specifications, the same functionalities. They're all the same. They're identical, and they're run in high volumes so that the company is able to tool up once and benefit from a run of production. So they're standard products meeting repeated demand, but they could be modified to make specials, but by and large they are standard products. They're highly specialized, and the machines are tooled up to produce these. So the skill requirements on the part of the workers and the operators is very narrow. They must just look after specific functions, and the machines will be set to produce the product to the required tolerances. There will be setup or changeover costs at each stage of production. It depends on how the business is structured. It may be it has some sort of sequential processing where products flow from one machine onto the next, in which case the machines are permanently set to do particular tasks. Or it may be, depending on the volume of the business, it may be one machine does several tasks, in which case the machine has to be switched over after a certain batch is run through. We also have mass or line processes. These are higher volumes than batch. These are really big runs, big runs of production, making the same item over and over. They are repeated products, sometimes known as runners, often referred to in the literature as a runner. A runner is it's a standard product, but it's produced on mass scale. Very narrow skills required by the workers. The machines are, generally speaking, tooled up to make these. Sometimes specialist machines or machines which have been modified will be used to make the products because so many of them are being made. There's not really a lot to be set up, because once the machines, if they're specialist machines, come in, then they are preset, and it's almost instantaneous. The output, once the inputs are fed into the machine, the outputs are instantaneous, and they are to the required tolerance. The machine is preset, so it's mass production, flowing enormous quantities of these coming off. We've also got continuous processes, extremely high volumes and very low variety, or even a single product. So these will be continuous processes. These ones the company produces all the time. It's continuous. there is a line of production running all the time. We could think of, for example, confectionery coming out of that particular sector. We think of different confectionery bars and chocolates and so on, and these are being produced on a continuous basis. So it's continuous production. They are repeat products in a sense, because insofar as it's continuous, they must be repeated. They must be coming through. So it can be viewed as a repeat product. Generally speaking, they're very highly capital intensive and automated. People do not make the confectionery by hand. Generally speaking, it's made by machines. It's a highly processed activity. The machines are very sophisticated and designed for the purpose. So there are few changeovers required. Generally speaking, in very high continuous processes, there are no changeovers. The machines are dedicated to a particular function. They are designed for that function, and they can't be switched over. That's what the machines does. That's the function it does. So there are few changeovers, or in many cases there are no changeovers. The machine is dedicated. It's difficult and also expensive to start and stop the process. When a process is stopped, many different parts will be affected. Go back to the confectionery example. There may be a baking process, so the ovens will have to be turned off. There will be components where they have to be cut and sliced, and then they'll have to be wrapped and packaged, and different processes along the line. Well, if one of the parts of the line breaks down, if one of the machines breaks down, then the whole line has to stop, and that can be very expensive. The whole line is taken off. All production stops. So that could be very expensive. Now the service package. Well, the service package, or if you like the service bundle, is a concept used to analyze and design services and consists of the following four features. So when we think of a service, we're thinking of a bundle of, if you like, attributes. So, for example, associated with the service might be supporting facilities. The service in the restaurant is to supply food. But they also supply restrooms, and they supply taxi services at the end, or they supply a nice atmosphere. It's a supporting services. They're not just supplying the food, they're supplying the ambience as well. It's a supporting facility. They might be facilitating goods. Sometimes if we buy a product, we want some other product to go with it. If we buy a car, the salesperson may ask us, what colour car do we want? In a sense, it's a facilitating good. It enables the market to operate, enables us to make the deal, because we get the car in the colour we want, or we get the car with the trim that we want, or the components that we want. They are facilitating. We don't have to have them. The car will work well enough with the standard paint and the standard equipment. But these are facilitating goods. There are sensual benefits or explicit services. Sometimes when we look at products, we imagine the product as having a particular shape, color, texture, and so on. But with services, for example, back to the food example, when we taste the food, it tastes nice. It's a sensual experience. We taste the food, we like it, and we like also the atmosphere in the restaurant, and we like the facilities of the restaurant. So it's part of the service package. It's something that attracts us. There may also be psychological benefits. Sometimes we're there because we have a need for status. So we want to be in a particular restaurant because it accords or it runs in line with our ambitions and our perceived status in the community. So particular restaurants we might visit, other restaurants we may not visit, even though perhaps they've got very good food. It's just the psychological benefit, the feeling that they're in the restaurant that they want to be in. Supporting facility for services. Well, marketing materials, those are very important. When we buy a product, a good or a service, we might want to have the marketing material that goes with it, which explains the product, explains the advantage of the product, and explains the features of the product. So it will be marketing material. But there may also be blogs in which the product or the service is discussed, and it may be reviewed by customers and their reviews are published. It might be helpful in assessing the quality of the product or the design. Customer services. Are there good customer services? Is it possible to contact the company if there's an issue? Is it possible to contact them and discuss the issue and get redress if the problem is theirs, if they've produced a faulty product, for example? Exhibitions could also be important. We like to see the product and like to see it demonstrated. So if we can get access to exhibitions where these products are being shown, then that's good, because it facilitates our understanding of the product and its capability and its attractiveness. So we see the product and we see it being demonstrated. So exhibitions are good sources of information. And of course, agents and representatives are useful. They are people who communicate the advantages of the product and are able to answer questions about the product, about its design, its functionality, its price, its durability, and so on. So we're able to get more information from them. Facilitating goods. Well, the goods we're looking for are, we have to have some consistency. So when we think about design, we have to think about consistency. We have to think about the product is going to be produced, and some customers are going to get a good experience, some are going to get a bad experience. Well, that's not acceptable. So they should all get a good experience, and the design process should enable production to take place in a way which gives the customers a consistency. The quantity of the goods must be sufficient to satisfy demand. So again, depending on the nature of the product, the cost of production, and the logistics in distributing the product, if it's a physical product. If it's service, the number of outlets who can deliver the service. These should be sufficient to satisfy the quantity demanded. If they're not, customers will become frustrated. It may lead to the product being seen as very high end, very high quality, very high end of the market. Alternatively, it may be seen that the company simply can't cope. It can't produce enough. Selection. What goods go together? In a restaurant, let's say with a service, we need to know what the theme of the restaurant is, and does it somehow match the food? If it's a very loud musical restaurant, it may not go with certain types of food, which may be seen as food for discussions and quiet moments. So selection might be an issue. what goes with what. The same with cars. If people are buying an expensive car, they may not select certain colors to go with the car because the car is of a particular image and they want to match that image. Certain colors that they could have opted for will have been excluded because they think it doesn't suit. So there has to be selection, there has to be a matching of products. And again, the design process should enable the product produced to be capable of selection with other matching or associated or complementary products. Explicit services, well, training of service personnel. It's important that there are some services that that need to be done openly, and the training of service personnel is one of them. There should be routines within the business, which means that the design panel and the design team are trained and updated on a continuous basis. They need to be at the forefront of thinking in this particular area. So they need to be involved in the industry in total and looking at industry and looking at feedback from marketing to ensure that the customer requirements are being factored into their designs. There has to be a comprehensiveness about the services. The services provided by the company to the customer, they should cover all aspects of the product. It would be wrong for the company to design a product, deliver it to market, and then say they are only going to look after a certain part of the product. The other part they're not going to look after. There should be a comprehensiveness about it, and that will make life easier for the marketing department. It'll make life easier for the customer, and it should generate extra sales. But it would be wrong just to select particular parts of the product and say that they are being maintained whilst other parts are not. Back to the car example, if we said that we were going to buy a new car and the manufacturer said they will look after the engine but they will not look after the body or anything electrical, well, that will put us off buying the car. There has to be consistency in terms of explicit services, the ones which we would get from the product. Our enjoyment of the product should be the same for the first, second, third, fourth, and so on items of the product we purchase. There should be consistency. If there's variability, then there is something wrong with the quality issues within the business. And the design process should ensure that consistency flows naturally out of production, that the product is designed in a way which makes it easy for the company to get consistency. The availability of the product is also an issue. It's important that the customers can get the product that's been promised. They should not have to settle for a version of the product because it's available when in fact they're looking for the other version, the one which is now not available. This will lead to frustration, it leads to loss of sales, it leads to a damaging the brand or the image of the business. It's very important that the products are available as promised. So whatever the quantities promised to outlets such as retailers or wholesalers or to the distribution channels that have been set up, whatever amounts promised, those are the amounts that should be delivered. And the design process, if it's very complex, may make that difficult. The design of a product should just about meet customer requirements. And by that I mean it should not be overly elaborate. It should be of an acceptable standard. And it's a question of dealing with the marketing department and finding out exactly what the customers want. And anything over and above that should not be produced. That's a waste. The customers are willing to pay for product X. Then why overproduce product X? Why over-design it? Why make it more complex? That's not what the customers are asking for. The customers are asking for product X. They're not asking for an augmented product X, a super duper product X. They're looking for product X, no more. So why make it more elaborate than it should be? And for that reason, availability is important. The customers are requiring a certain product, certain attributes and certain characteristics. That's what they get. If the company is over elaborate in its whole design process, it'll take longer to produce and the availability may be jeopardized as a consequence. Implicit services, well, it's the attitude of the service personnel. When customers buy a product and have to have the product serviced, they need to have positive attitude from the personnel. They should be made welcomed, they should be informed about what's required, they should have a nice place to wait if they're going to wait. They should be dealt with respect. They are the customer. The product is in for service, so they're still customers. There should be privacy and security. Privacy, there's no need to for the company to divulge to anyone else that someone was in for service. Somebody took their car in for service. There's no need for that release of that information, and it would be wrong to release the information without the person's consent. But also there should be security of information about the customers, and also security of the customers when they go to have their products serviced. The environment should be secure. It should be convenient to have products serviced. There should be outlets who will deal with this. It should not be something that's complicated or involving sending the product even to a different country. It should be convenient, it should be available, and should be available locally, ideally, where the product can be serviced. The atmosphere should be good as well. It should be a welcoming atmosphere. If they have to take a product in to be serviced into the company, then their trip to the company should not be a chore, should not be difficult. It should be a welcoming atmosphere. It should be almost a pleasant experience. The product has to be serviced, they have to wait for it, a nice waiting room, some magazines, feel relaxed, nice chairs. Waiting should be informed. The amount of time required should be informed. It should be kept up to date with the job. They should be told where the job has got to, how long more it will take, what's involved, what's been found, if there are any issues. They should be informed right the way through. The status of the job, where it's got to in terms of the work flow within the business. Is the job next in line? Is it currently being worked on? Are there two jobs in front of it? How long will it take? So they should be informed about that aspect of the business as well. And sense of well-being, depending on the nature of the product. The implicit services of the product should give a sense of well-being. If it's let's say it's a service, again, and let's say it's back to food. Let's say someone visits a restaurant and they leave the restaurant satisfied, they feel happy, they feel contented, they've had a good experience. It's a sense of well-being. They've enjoyed that experience. Their life has been improved by having a nice meal. A sense of well-being, a sense of enjoyment, because the service was good, the food was good, and now this after effect, this implicit service, which lingers with them, is this contentment. They feel happy about the experience. We get it with products as well. A product which is well designed, which can help us in our daily routines. That's like a sense of well-being. We enjoy the product. We enjoy using it. We enjoy having the product. It might be a vacuum cleaner in the home, or it might be a coffee maker in the home. It might be a new laptop. It could be anything. Insofar as it facilitates what we want, and we have a pleasure out of having it and using it, we feel good as a consequence. So now, in this session, what we've talked about is really the design process, although parts of this particular video may seem to have drifted from that. In fact, that's what we've been talking about throughout. We have talked about different issues associated with the design process. In particular, the issues of design and the issues of process. And in the early stages of the video, we talked about the connection between the two and how one determined the other. In which case, it's important for us to look at the nature of the product and the types of system that could be used in the production of that product. So we talked about different types of workflow situation, batch, one-offs, and so on. Continuous flows of production. We talked about various types. And these are important because they will be, in a sense, the product of the design process for that particular product. But the design process, of course, has got all sorts of issues associated with it. It's the explicit product, physically looking at it, if it's a physical product, looking at it, and it may be tactile, we may be able to touch it and experience it. But it may also have implicit issues for us. We may enjoy having the product, but the product may have ancillary products related to it. For example, if it breaks down, the ancillary product would be the service sector and the servicing of the product within the whole service area, the whole arena of services as another package that comes with the product. So sometimes when we buy a product, we're buying not just the physical product, we're buying the services and the backup and the support and the image of the product, the satisfaction we get from possessing the product. And if it's a service, we also have similar feelings. If we go to a restaurant that's, let's say, very expensive, but we like it and we can afford it, there may be an element of status involved, as in addition to enjoying nice food and a nice atmosphere. Or the ambience of the restaurant may suit our personality. It's not noisy, it's not busy. It's a quiet restaurant, nice atmosphere. It depends. So when we talk about design, we're really linking lots of issues that are associated with the operational end of the business, and the operational end of the business are being determined by the design issues. And that's the point. So that's all I'm going to deal with in this session. It's been a long video. I suggest you stop it and start it, go over it again, stop it and start it, make notes, do some reading, pad out your notes, and get an understanding for what's meant in this area. In the meantime, that's all we're going to deal with, so thank you for watching.